The Cycle of Endless Dawn. Part 1. The Day That Never Ends. The first time it happened, Ryan thought it was a glitch. A mistake. A bad dream he couldn't wake up from. It was simple, at first. Just small, insignificant things. A cup of coffee spilled in the morning, a strange noise in the hallway, a misstep on the way out the door. But when he found himself waking up exactly where he had the day before, staring at the same bland ceiling, the same clock ticking on the wall, he knew something wasn't right. It had started like any other Tuesday. The alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., just as it always did. Ryan groggily reached for his phone, silencing the harsh buzzing before it could fully pull him from sleep. He was late, as usual. He had a meeting to get to. Another pointless presentation, another corporate drone fest. Get up, get dressed, and get moving, he muttered to himself, slipping into the motions of his morning routine. A quick shower, a cup of stale coffee, and the rush of trying to beat the clock. He had almost made it out the door when his phone buzzed with a message from his boss. "Don't be late to the meeting today, Ryan. We've got big plans." Ryan had read that message 1,000 times. It was his boss's standard reminder. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. But as he shoved his jacket on and glanced back at the clock, something felt off. He hadn't checked the date yet. It was only after slamming his car door and pulling out of the driveway that the dread really started to creep in. The radio in his car sputtered with static as he turned it on. "Good morning, everyone," the DJ chirped. "It's Tuesday, February 13th, and we're in for another great day here in Millbrook. Traffic's light, skies are clear, so enjoy your commute." February 13th. The date was wrong. Or at least, it felt wrong. He wasn't sure why. He pulled out his phone and glanced at the calendar. February 13th. He checked his calendar again, then his watch. The date was right. The time was right. Everything was right, but his stomach twisted with an anxiety he couldn't explain. The drive to work was uneventful, but that feeling, the sense of dread, never left him. He couldn't shake it. By the time he reached his office building, he was sweating, his hands slick on the steering wheel. The building loomed ahead of him, its glass windows blinking in the morning sun. "Just get through the day," Ryan told himself. "Get through the day, then go home. You're just overthinking this. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. When he entered the building, something was still wrong. As he walked through the lobby, the familiar faces of his coworkers greeted him, but there was something empty about them. Their smiles were too wide, their words too rehearsed. He could feel their eyes on him, like they knew something he didn't. Like they were waiting for him to catch on. And then it happened. The meeting started, just like every Tuesday meeting before it. His boss was there, standing at the front of the conference room with a PowerPoint presentation on the screen. Ryan zoned out as the corporate droning began. Sales numbers, deadlines, the usual. But then, as the clock ticked closer to noon, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. It was sudden, like a knife, and then, nothing. His body went cold. His vision blurred. His heart stopped. He woke up. Exactly the same. The same alarm, the same ceiling, the same clock ticking on the wall. The same day. Ryan's chest tightened, panic flooding his system. He sat up, his heart racing, the memories of the previous day flooding back. Had it been a dream? Had it all just been some strange hallucination? No. He had died. He was sure of it. He could feel the remnants of that pain, that coldness in his body. But here he was, awake again. In the same place. On the same day. Ryan scrambled out of bed, his hands trembling as he grabbed for his phone. It read February 13th again. the same Tuesday. His breath came in shallow bursts, panic building as he realized the horror of it all. No. This can't be real. He tried to recall every detail of his morning, every conversation, every look exchanged. He had been through this before, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just déjà vu, it was something far worse. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a glitch. He wasn't dreaming. He was stuck. Stuck in February 13th. The clock on the wall ticked on as he stared at it, the seconds stretching out, mocking him. He was frozen in time, trapped in a loop that he couldn't escape. He tried to leave. He tried to run. But no matter what he did, no matter where he went, the day repeated. By the time he stumbled into his car again, he realized he was screaming, but no one could hear him. He wasn't sure if it was the second, third, or 20th time, but it didn't matter. He was back in the same place, the same moment, and the world around him was moving as if it had no memory of what had happened the moment before. Ryan spent the next few hours desperately trying to break the cycle. He tried everything. He called in sick. He avoided work altogether. But it didn't matter. Each time he tried to escape, it all went back to the beginning. It wasn't until he reached the office again that he saw something new. A shadow. A figure that shouldn't have been there. It was a man, dressed in a long black coat, standing just outside the door to the conference room. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the man had been there the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Ryan approached him, his heartbeat quickening as he reached the door. "Hey, do you know what's going on?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. The man turned slowly, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He lifted his head just enough for Ryan to see his eyes. They were dark, too dark, like empty pits that swallowed all light. "The day will repeat until you accept it," the man said in a voice that wasn't his own. It was distorted, layered with something that made Ryan's skin crawl. "And then you will die again." Ryan's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" The man tilted his head to one side, and the light from the overhead lamps seemed to flicker in time with his movements. "You are dead. But you're also not." Max's breath caught in his throat, but before he could respond, the world went cold. The darkness grew heavier, like a blanket smothering him. The walls twisted and warped, the floor cracked beneath him. The next time he woke up, it was the same. The clock. The alarm. The date. February 13th. Again. And again. And again. Part 2. The Man in the Dark. Ryan's head slammed into the pillow, the room spinning. He couldn't make sense of the world around him. Every time he opened his eyes, it was the same, February 13th, over and over. The clock, the light filtering through the blinds, the sound of the street outside. It was as if he was being torn apart and stitched back together again, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by an unseen hand. He had died. He knew that much. But this endless loop, it wasn't natural. It was a curse, something beyond his understanding. No matter what he did, the day reset, the same sequence of events playing out in cruel repetition. He could try to avoid it, to change things, but no matter how hard he fought, it always ended in the same way. The first time he died, it was swift. A sharp pain in his chest, and then nothing. The second time? It was slower. His body seemed to drag on, as if every moment stretched on for an eternity. The third time, he had felt his breath stop, his lungs struggling for air. It was always the same, pain, darkness, then the feeling of waking, only to start again. The shadows in the hall grew darker each time. Ryan could feel them, creeping up behind him, watching from the corners. But every time he tried to confront them, they they would fade, like a nightmare slipping into the morning light. He had tried everything, ignoring the clock, avoiding the office, staying home, but the loop was relentless. Each reset brought something new, something more sinister. But now, after the 6th or 7th time, he'd lost track. He realized he wasn't entirely alone. It was the man in the dark. Ryan had first noticed him on the 4th repeat. The figure had been standing just outside the conference room, motionless, like a shadow cast by a lamp. The strange part was, Ryan had never seen him before. He wasn't a part of the company, he didn't work with anyone, and yet, he was always there. He had become a fixture of the loop. The man was tall, dressed in a long, dark coat with the collar turned up, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. Every time Ryan glanced at him, he felt a pull, a sense that something was terribly wrong. But when he tried to speak to him, the man didn't respond. He simply turned his head, his eyes reflecting the dim light, and the chilling words left his mouth. "The day will repeat until you accept it." Ryan had tried to ignore him, tried to break free by changing the pattern. But the man, the dark figure, was always there, always watching. He was becoming more than just an observer. He was part of the cycle, somehow tied to it. And now, Ryan wasn't sure if he was part of the nightmare, or if the nightmare was part of him. This time, when Ryan woke up, he didn't fight the loop. Instead, he listened. He listened to the whispers from the walls, the slow creaking of the floorboards, the hum of the world resetting. The same thing happened again, and again, and again. But something shifted. He wasn't alone anymore. There was a presence. In the stillness of the room, he could hear faint murmurs, the echo of footsteps that weren't his own. They were coming from behind the walls, from the air, from the ground beneath his feet. The house itself was alive, breathing, watching. It wasn't just the time that was looping. The house, this world, was part of it too. And it wanted something. On his way to work that morning, he glanced into his rearview mirror, and for a split second, he saw someone in the back seat. A reflection, a face distorted by the same shadows that had filled the hallway. But when he whipped around to look, no one was there. He gripped the wheel tighter, his pulse hammering in his throat. The terror started to claw its way back into his mind. It was only a matter of time before this endless cycle turned worse, before he was trapped here forever. But what was the key? What would it take to break free? Ryan's instincts told him to follow the man in the dark. He had to confront him, face whatever it was that was controlling the cycle. If he was going to die again, at least he would have answers before he did. That afternoon, when he reached the office, the man was there. As usual, standing just outside the conference room, his figure rigid and unmoving. Ryan took a deep breath, fighting the surge of panic that rose in his chest. He had seen the man in the corner of his eye 1,000 times before, but this time, there was no turning away. He marched over to the man, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was done being a passive observer. He was going to demand answers. "Who are you?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling but determined. "What's happening to me? Why am I stuck in this loop? What do you want?" The man turned slowly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. His face remained hidden in the shadow of his hat, but Ryan could feel his gaze, cold, empty, warm. "You're asking the wrong questions," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "You already know the answer. You've known all along." Ryan clenched his jaw, frustration building in his chest. "I don't understand," he whispered. "What do you mean? Why is this happening?" The man tilted his head to one side, a slow, almost pitying motion. "You're dead, Ryan. You've always been dead. This loop isn't something you're trapped in. It's something you've created. It's the price of a broken reality. Ryan stepped back, his mind reeling. Dead? What was he saying? He had felt alive. He could feel his heartbeat, the sweat on his palms. His breath had been ragged in his chest, his body aching every time he died. How can I be dead? Ryan whispered. I can't be. You died, the man repeated, his voice growing darker. And now you're caught in the consequence of your own making. You created this loop. It's your fault, Ryan. The world around Ryan seemed to tilt. The walls pressed him tighter. His pulse quickened, but the man's words, their weight, began to settle into his consciousness. The dread that had once felt like a passing fear was now something real, something he couldn't escape. Ryan stumbled back, clutching his head as the room spun around him. How could I have done this? The man stepped forward, his presence towering over Ryan. Your choices. Your actions. Your regrets. This is the price you pay for living a life of emptiness. Ryan's vision swam, his knees buckling under him as the room grew darker. The shadows in the corners seemed to reach out for him, pulling him back into the blackness. The man's cold fingers touched his shoulder, and with a final, chilling whisper, he said, This cycle will never end until you understand what you've done. And then, the darkness claimed him. Ryan woke again. It was February 13th. But now, he understood. Part 3, The Weight of the Loop. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he slowly opened his eyes. The same bland ceiling above him, the same ticking of the clock echoing in his skull. The room was too familiar, like it had become part of him, and he had become part of it. He was back. The day was starting again. February 13th. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. It was no longer just the discomfort of repetition, it was suffocating. His body felt heavy, every muscle aching with the knowledge that he had done this all before. He had woken up here before, and he would wake up here again. There was no escape from the endless cycle, no way out. But something was different this time. The moment he opened his eyes, a cold wave of clarity washed over him. The words of the man in the dark echoed in his mind. You're dead, Ryan. You've always been dead. This loop isn't something you're trapped in, it's something you've created. Dead. He couldn't process it at first. He had died, that was the truth. But how? When? Why? Ryan forced himself to sit up, his head pounding, his chest tight. He tried to remember, but the memories flickered and danced at the edge of his thoughts, just out of reach. Every time he died, the pieces of the puzzle he was piecing together scattered further apart, making it harder to remember what had brought him here in the first place. The loop, the pain, the frustration, each time he came back, the answers slipped further away. Ryan swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet touching the cold floor. His mind raced as he reached for his phone. The screen lit up, and the date stared back at him. February 13th. It was the same. Always the same. But now, there was no hesitation. No panic. Just a quiet acceptance. It was as if the weight of the truth had already settled deep within him. The answers were not found in the external world. No matter how hard he tried to break free, he kept returning. He kept reliving the same day. Every death, every moment of panic, every futile attempt to escape, all of it was part of the cycle, the price of the curse he had unknowingly placed upon himself. Ryan walked through his apartment, his movements slow, deliberate. The room was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The quiet now felt oppressive, each tick of the clock a reminder that time itself had betrayed him. The man in the dark had been right. He wasn't trapped by some external force. He was trapped by his own mind. The house of mirrors. The broken cycle. The figure that had haunted him since the first time he'd realized something was wrong. It all started with the choices he'd made. The regrets he'd pushed aside. The life he had lived, and the life he had failed to truly live. Ryan's feet carried him out of his apartment before he realized what he was doing. He needed to confront this, once and for all. He couldn't live in this endless loop of death and rebirth without answers. He had to understand why he had been cursed to repeat this day. As he drove toward the office, a sense of determination began to overtake the numbness he had felt since waking. The man in the dark had said he had created this. But how? What choices had he made? What had he done that had bound him to this never-ending nightmare? When he arrived at the office, it was exactly as it had been every time before. The same bland walls, the same sterile smell, the same employees moving through their daily routines like mindless automatons. Everyone was here, as if they had never left. Their faces were unchanged, but there was a coldness in their eyes now, something distant, something hollow. Ryan moved through the hallway, passing the same people who had greeted him day after day. No one acknowledged him. They didn't see him. It was as if he didn't exist. He wasn't part of their world anymore. But then, he saw him again. The man in the dark. He stood in the same spot as always, by the conference room, just out of sight, as if waiting for Ryan to notice him. This time, there was no hesitation. No panic. Ryan walked toward him with purpose, determined to find out what the hell was going on. "Are you here to finish it?" the man asked, his voice a low rasp, carrying through the silence of the office. "To accept your fate?" Ryan stopped a few feet from him, feeling the coldness of the man's presence seep into him. "I'm not here to accept anything," he said, his voice rough, but strong. "I'm here to understand. Why am I trapped in this cycle? Why is this happening to me?" The man tilted his head, his wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. For the first time, Ryan saw a flicker of something in the man's eyes, something almost human. "Because you've been given a choice, Ryan. But you refuse to make it. You keep refusing." Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "What choice? What are you talking about?" "The choice to stop running. To stop pretending. To confront the life you left behind. The regrets. The ones you buried in your subconscious, hoping they would stay there." The man stepped closer, his shadow stretching like a dark tide. "This is the price of that. The price of the denial." Ryan's mind spun as he processed the man's words. "The price of denial?" "I don't remember," Ryan said softly, the weight of the words settling on his chest. "I don't remember what I'm running from. What did I do?" The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was something darker. Something older. "You never forgave yourself, Ryan. You never let go of the guilt. The day you chose to bury your past, you buried yourself with it. The cycle began the moment you walked away from who you were." Ryan's head swam as the realization hit him. His life, everything he had done, everything he had ignored, every choice he had made to run from his past, was what had led him here. He had created the loop by refusing to face his regrets. By running, he had condemned himself to relive the same day over and over. "Your soul has been trapped here, Ryan," the man in the dark continued. "And only you can end this cycle. But it will require a price. It will require facing the life you refuse to acknowledge." Ryan stumbled back, the weight of the man's words crashing down on him. He had buried his past, his choices, his mistakes. And now, they had come for him. The man reached out, his hand cold as ice, and touched Ryan's forehead. "You've been given your chance. Will you accept the consequences? Or will you continue to deny them? Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the darkness swirling around him, the weight of his own guilt, his own refusal to live, and for the first time, he knew the answer. Ryan awoke. But this time, it wasn't February 13th. This time, the world wasn't the same. Part 4. The Echoes of Fate. Ryan's eyes snapped open. The ceiling above him was different. The sound of the ticking clock was quieter. The usual oppressive stillness of the room seemed to have lifted. But something was off. It wasn't just the time. It wasn't just the clock. Everything was subtly, unnervingly different. This isn't the same, Ryan thought, as his pulse quickened. He sat up slowly, scanning the room. The light was warmer, the air less suffocating. The oppressive weight that had clung to him for what felt like forever had finally lifted, but in its place, a cold knot of fear began to form in his stomach. He glanced at his phone. February 13th. The date still stared back at him. But the words no longer had the same power. He wasn't stuck anymore, at least, not in the way he had been before. The loop wasn't repeating, yet. He was awake. He was free. He had broken the cycle, hadn't he? Ryan stood, a feeling of detachment still lingering in his limbs as if his body was slowly trying to catch up to the sudden shift. He needed answers. He needed to understand. The man in the dark, the figure who had haunted his waking moments, and the nightmares that bled into reality, had said that the cycle could only end when Ryan faced his past. But how? What was it that he had done? What was buried in the depths of his own memories that had kept him trapped in this never-ending repetition? And more importantly, why had it taken him so long to realize it? His eyes fell on the mirror by the door, something he had hardly ever noticed before. But today it felt different. The glass was cracked down the center, jagged edges cutting through the reflection, like a scar across his face. He could see his own eyes in the broken glass, darker, more hollow than they had ever been. Ryan stepped closer to it, almost against his will. He had come to loathe mirrors during the loop. They had always reflected something else, a distorted version of himself. But today, as he stared into the shards, he saw something familiar. Not the cold, hollow eyes that had haunted him. Not the terrified man who had desperately searched for an escape. But something deeper. Something hidden. A glimpse of the man he had been. His past. A fleeting memory flashed, flickered and then disappeared. A childhood. A home. A voice. His mother's. Ryan, the soft voice echoed in his mind. Don't forget who you are. The words sank into his soul like an anchor, and he gasped, feeling the pieces of his past start to click together. The memories, his real memories, rushed back with a force that nearly knocked him over. It wasn't just the feeling of guilt. It wasn't just the weight of something he had left behind. It was something much worse. Ryan had forgotten himself. He had lost himself in the life he had built. The corporate world. The endless cycle of meetings, deadlines, and distractions. He had buried the past, thinking it would keep him safe, thinking it would keep him moving forward. But now, the truth was coming back with full force. He was responsible. His mother's voice. The echoes of that night. The argument he'd had with her. His last words to her. He had been so angry. So selfish. It was the last time he saw her before she died. He had blamed her for everything, and he had run away from it. From her. But in doing so, he had buried something far deeper. The death of his mother. The accident. The crash. It had all started that night. And it had continued because Ryan had refused to face it. He had locked it away so deep inside that it had festered, turning into this endless loop, this endless torment. He couldn't run anymore. A sharp, bitter pain flooded through him as the realization hit him all at once. Ryan stood frozen in front of the mirror, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on him. He had created this cycle, this curse. Every moment of fear, every repetition, every death, it had all been his doing. Not because of some supernatural force. Not because of some dark magic. But because he had refused to accept what had happened. He had run from his regrets, his guilt. He had locked it all away, hoping it would disappear. But it never did. It only grew stronger. The whisper of the man in the dark echoed in his mind once more. This is the price you pay for living a life of emptiness. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He had been trapped by his own denial. And the only way out was to face it. To confront the past he had left behind. To make peace with the mistakes he had tried so hard to forget. But he wasn't ready to face it yet. Not entirely. Not until he spoke to her. Ryan rushed out of his apartment, his heart racing. He had to go to the place he had sworn never to visit again, the cemetery. He hadn't been to his mother's grave in years. The guilt, the pain, it had driven him to stay away. But today, he knew he had no choice. He had to confront what he had buried. He had to confront the woman he had failed. The drive to the cemetery felt different this time. The streets seemed less oppressive, the sunlight somehow warmer. As he passed familiar landmarks, Ryan felt a strange sense of recognition, but also an unsettling distance. The town was the same, but he wasn't. Not anymore. When he arrived, he parked near the entrance and stepped out into the quiet cemetery. The wind was light, rustling the leaves of the trees, the air thick with the scent of earth and flowers. His footsteps crunched on the gravel path as he made his way toward the small corner of the cemetery where she was buried. He found the grave easily, his mother's name etched in cold stone. Lucille Harlan. Below it the dates, her birth and death. The years. The numbers that defined her existence. But they were just numbers. Her life was more than that. So much more. Ryan knelt in front of the grave, his fingers trembling as they brushed the edges of the stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I failed you. I never..." He broke off as the wind picked up, sweeping across the cemetery, rustling the trees. For a brief moment, he thought he heard a voice. Soft. Familiar. "I forgive you, Ryan." His breath caught in his throat. He stood up quickly, looking around. The cemetery was empty. Still. Silent. But as he stared at the grave, something shifted. A crackling sound, like the faintest whisper in the air, hung around him. It was a sound of release. Of peace. Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his guilt lift ever so slightly. The cycle wasn't over. But it was shifting. He had faced his past, and that was the first step. The loop wouldn't hold him forever. The ground shifted beneath his feet. The air stilled. And he knew, deep in his bones, that the end of the cycle was finally within his reach. Part 5. The Breaking of Time. Ryan stood in the graveyard, the wind carrying the faint scent of autumn as it swept through the trees. He hadn't expected it to feel like this. The air so still, the weight of the day lifting as though something had finally clicked into place. It wasn't peace, not entirely. But there was a flicker of it, a realization that had eluded him for so long. He'd confronted the past. Confronted the guilt. The regrets. And for the first time, there was a shift, a tremor in the fabric of this unrelenting cycle that he had been trapped in for so long. The voices. The whispers from the walls, the man in the dark, the endless repetition of the day, had been his own mind trying to tell him something, trying to force him to face what he had buried. But even now, with that realization sitting heavy in his chest, the cycle wasn't over. He still had to break it. He still had to undo what had been done. And he was running out of time. The thought struck him like a thunderclap. Running out of time. He didn't know how he knew, but he felt it. The subtle tremor in the ground beneath him. The way the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something. For him. The trees around him rustled, but the air was still, too still. The atmosphere was pregnant with anticipation, as if the universe itself was bracing for the next turn of events. Ryan wiped his brow, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. He couldn't leave this place, not yet. He couldn't go back to the office, back to that endless cycle of repetition. No, he had to finish it. He had to break the loop once and for all. His eyes flicked back to his mother's grave, her name carved in stone, Lucille Harland, and beneath it the dates, the years of her life, the years of his life, the years that had been wasted, torn between guilt and avoidance. But now that weight didn't feel quite so suffocating. Maybe it was the air. Maybe it was the presence that lingered, something that he couldn't see, but felt deep inside his chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, his voice hoarse, broken. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave you. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to live with the weight." A rustle behind him made him pause, his body tensing. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as if some unseen hand was brushing against him. He turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just the empty cemetery, the wind stirring the leaves, the sound of his own breath in the cold air. Then he heard it. A soft voice. Faint at first, but growing louder. "You've broken the cycle, Ryan." It wasn't a whisper. It was clear, distinct, coming from somewhere just beyond his reach. He spun around, his heart pounding. But again, there was nothing, except the shadow. The man in the dark stood at the edge of the graveyard, his wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. The same cold, empty eyes. The same long, dark coat that seemed to swallow the light around him. "You," Ryan's voice shook. "You're the one who put me here. You're the reason for all of this." The man didn't move, his presence chilling in its stillness. "No, Ryan," the man replied, his voice low and guttural. "I didn't put you here. You put yourself here. You've always been here." Ryan's confusion only deepened. "I don't understand." "What do you mean?" "The loop, the cycle. It exists because of you. Because of your refusal to face the truth. To accept what you did. To live with what you lost." Ryan's breath came in shallow bursts. I did everything you told me. I confronted it. I faced my regrets. I went to her grave. You accepted it, yes. But you haven't forgiven yourself," the man said, stepping closer, his silhouette cutting through the fading light. "That's the final piece. The one you've been missing." Ryan's knees buckled beneath him. The world felt like it was tilting. Forgiveness? How could he forgive himself? He had failed. He had abandoned his mother. He had run away when she needed him most. How could he ever forgive that? "You're still holding on to the weight of it," the man continued, his voice like ice. "This cycle won't break until you let go." Ryan shook his head, his hands trembling. "I don't know how." "Let go," the man said again, the words sharper now, like a command. "Forgive yourself? Or stay here forever? In this place, this time. Always running, always hiding, always trapped." The words echoed through Ryan's mind like a hammer striking an anvil. Forgive yourself. It felt impossible, but something in Ryan snapped. He had been holding on to this guilt, this burden, for so long. It was his prison. His chains. And now, he realized, it wasn't the house. It wasn't the loop. It was his own refusal to forgive. His own fear of the truth. His mother's voice flickered in his mind again, as soft as a breath on the wind. I forgive you, Ryan. You're free now. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. The weight in his chest began to lift, and the world around him seemed to shift. The air felt lighter, the sky above brighter. He closed his eyes, letting the wind blow across his face, feeling a release he didn't even know he needed. The pain, the guilt, it was all fading. The walls that had once trapped him, the cycle of death and rebirth, were crumbling. The curse was lifting. He had finally let go. When he opened his eyes again, the man in the dark was gone. Ryan stood in the graveyard, alone, but not alone. The day had ended. The cycle had broken. The man had been right. It had never been about escaping the loop. It had always been about forgiveness. About accepting the past, not as a weight, but as a part of him. A part he had to live with, to understand. And, most importantly, to forgive. He wasn't trapped anymore. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, the last remnants of daylight casting long shadows across the cemetery. But Ryan stood tall. Finally free. Free to live. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe. The end.